All right, so are you ready to dive into a real classic?
Oh, yeah, let's do it.
This time, it's the 1984 film Gremlins.
Okay.
You sent in a really cool movie review.
Right.
And it seems like you want to get into more than just like what happens in the movie.
Yeah.
We're talking about characters and visuals, even the director's style.
Sure.
Basically all the good stuff.
Yeah. Gremlins is a movie that you can really look closely at.
Yeah, and I think what gets people interested right away is that basic idea.
What's that?
This cute, fuzzy creature turns into this total monster.
Yeah.
But only if you break 3 simple rules.
Yeah, and it's Christmas time.
Yeah,
it's like the perfect setup for disaster.
Exactly.
It's like a recipe for it.
So let's unpack why this movie, Gremlins, became such a cult classic.
Sure.
And maybe you can help me figure out if those rules are just there to like make the movie exciting or if they mean something more.
Okay, let's see.
Okay, so the movie happens in this like perfect town called Kingston Falls.
Right. Yeah.
And it's Christmas time.
Yeah.
Snow falling carols, playing.
Very idyllic.
Yeah, total holiday picture vibes.
Yeah.
But then these creatures show up and just mess everything up.
The review that you sent in calls the plot deceptively simple.
Oh, really?
I think that's a good way to put it, because the plot might seem pretty straightforward, like a normal monster movie.
Yeah.
There's actually a lot going on underneath.
Okay, so what makes it more than just like a fun monster movie?
Well, you have this like perfect small town that's invaded by all this chaos.
Yeah.
And it's almost like a metaphor for like how people felt back then.
Yeah.
Like their anxieties. The 1980s had a lot of changes in society and money.
Right.
And I think Gremlins like shows that feeling that something bad is about to happen even when everything seems okay.
I hadn't thought about it that way.
Yeah.
It's like the gremlins are the things we try to hide or control, but they can just like explode out.
Exactly.
And then there are the 3 rules that Billy has to follow.
Yeah.
No bright light, no water, no feeding after midnight.
Right.
Those rules are super important to the story.
Yeah. They definitely like make you feel like something bad's going to happen.
Yeah.
But honestly, sometimes those rules feel kind of random.
Oh, yeah.
Like, why those specific rules?
You know what? I think that not knowing is part of why they work so well. They make you afraid of the unknown.
Oh, yeah.
The idea that there are things we don't understand.
Right.
And we can't always control those things.
Yeah.
It's like a classic fairy tale or myth.
Right.
Where they just give you rules without explaining them.
Yeah.
And that makes it even more mysterious and scary.
So it's not just about following the rules.
Right.
It's about being scared of what happens when we don't.
Exactly.
And we don't really know what's going to happen.
And that connects to the themes of responsibility
Oh, wow.
and what happens when you do something wrong.
Yeah.
That are all through the movie.
Oh.
Like Billy doesn't follow the rules.
Yeah.
And that has really bad consequences.
Yeah.
Not just for him, but for the whole town.
Right.
Wow.
So we've got this like creepy feeling of worry and these rules that are both important and kind of random.
Yeah.
So where do the characters fit into all of this?
Well, you can't talk about Gremlins without talking about Gizmo.
Of course.
He's like the heart of the movie.
Yeah.
This really cute, childlike creature.
Right.
That's just pure innocence.
He's so cute.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big part of why the movie works.
What do you mean?
You have this super strong contrast between how innocent Gizmo is
Right.
and all the crazy stuff the Gremlins do.
He's like what Christmas is supposed to be about, that wonder and joy.
Yeah.
But then you have the Gremlins, and they're like the opposite of that. They're like, all our bad impulses, our tendency to do too much of stuff, our ability to just cause chaos.
So it's like Gizmo represents the Christmas spirit, and the Gremlins represent like the spirit of going completely nuts during the holidays.
You could say that they embody that dark humor the review talks about.
Oh, yeah.
They make fun of our traditions and how we act,
Right.
but in a really dark and funny way.
Can you give me an example?
Yeah, sure.
What's a scene that shows that mix of funny and creepy?
Okay, well, there's that scene where they take over the movie theater.
Oh, yeah.
They're watching Snow White,
Right.
which is like the most classic innocent cartoon.
Right.
But it's both hilarious and kind of disturbing to see these creatures watching it
Oh, yeah.
and like really enjoying it.
Yeah, it's like they're genuinely into the movie,
Yeah.
but it's also totally messed up,
Yeah.
considering what they are.
And what they've done. And
Yeah.
that's what Joe Dante's direction is so good at.
What do you mean?
He can create moments that are funny and scary at the same time.
Right.
You laugh and cringe all at once.
It's a hard balance to get right.
It is.
Speaking of Joe Dante, the review talks about how he mixes dark humor and social satire.
Right.
I get the humor part.
Yeah.
But what's being satirized in a movie about little monsters going crazy?
I think Dante's using the Gremlins to say something about American culture.
Like what?
Especially consumerism and all the crazy stuff that was happening in the 1980s.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But some people might say it's just a fun monster movie.
Yeah.
What makes you think there's a deeper critique happening?
Think about how the Gremlins act.
Okay.
They're obsessed with gadgets and junk food.
Yeah.
And just causing trouble.
Right.
That reflects this kind of overindulgence that was definitely a thing in the 1980s.
Yeah.
They're like this twisted mirror.
Okay.
Showing us our own desires and impulses.
Okay, so it's like they're taking those parts of our culture and making them super extreme.
Yeah.
To the point where it's ridiculous.
And destructive.
And usually destructive.
Exactly. And by putting them in this perfect Christmas setting,
right.
Dante's also like playing with what we accept from a Christmas movie.
Yeah.
He's putting chaos and criticism into this genre that's usually all about heartwarming stuff.
Right.
It's pretty clever. And that's part of what made Gremlins such a big deal.
You're right. It wasn't just a hit.
Yeah.
This movie actually changed how movies are rated.
Oh, yeah.
The review talked about the PG-13 rating.
Yeah. It was one of the movies that led to the PG-13 rating.
Okay, so like before those movies, you basically had GPG and R.
Right.
What was it about Gremlins that made people think we need a new rating?
Well, you have these cute creatures.
Right.
And a Christmas setting in a small town.
Yeah.
Seems like a family movie.
Right.
But then you have these really intense scenes with violence and horror and dark humor.
Right.
That were definitely not okay for little kids.
Yeah. It's like it tricks you into thinking it's one kind of movie.
Yeah.
And then it takes a hard turn.
Exactly.
And that's what started a debate. Parents and critics were worried about kids seeing stuff that was too grown up for them, even if it wasn't quite R-rated.
Right.
So Gremlins was like right on the edge, pushing those boundaries.
Pushing the limits.
But it wasn't just the violence, right?
No.
There were also those kind of disturbing themes we talked about, like the anxiety and the satire.
Absolutely. Gremlins was part of this change happening in culture.
What do you mean?
People were getting more and more concerned about how media affects kids.
Right.
They wanted to protect them from certain types of content.
Yeah.
But they also realized that older kids and teenagers were ready for stories that were a little more complicated.
So it was a tough balance.
Yeah.
Protecting kids.
Right.
But also giving them stories that showed them the darker side of things.
Even if it was through humor or fantasy.
Exactly.
And that's how the PG-13 rating came about. It was a direct response to the need for something in between. Gremlins and Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom made the film industry face this problem and come up with a solution.
Wow, so this movie actually helped create a whole new way of rating movies.
Yeah.
And that's still affecting how movies are made and marketed today.
It really shows how much influence the movie had.
It's crazy.
It wasn't just fun and different.
Yeah.
It was a cultural touchstone that made people talk about how audiences and filmmakers and the actual content relate to each other.
It's amazing to think that one movie could do all that.
It shows how powerful stories can be and how films can reflect and even shape our culture.
That makes me think about something else the review mentioned.
What's that?
The way Gremlins plays with our expectations of what a Christmas movie should be.
Yeah.
It's not exactly filled with heartwarming cheer.
Not really.
It definitely goes against those traditional holiday films instead of focusing on happy messages and happy endings.
Yeah.
Gremlins throws in chaos, mayhem, and even some social commentary into the holiday season. I remember reading that some critics called it a subversive take on Christmas movies.
Oh, really?
What makes it so different from those classic holiday films?
Well, think about your typical Christmas movie.
Okay.
It's usually set in this perfect snowy town.
Yeah.
The characters are all nice and generous. There's this feeling of warmth and togetherness.
Right. It's all about family and being giving.
Exactly like a Hallmark movie.
Yeah.
And while those movies are definitely charming, Gremlins takes a different approach.
What do you mean?
It acknowledges that the holidays aren't always perfect.
Right.
There's stress, family drama, and things can go wrong
Oh, yeah.
in really messy ways.
It's almost like a dark mirror reflecting all the worries and frustrations that can be hiding under the surface of those picture-perfect holiday get-togethers.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
It reminds us that even during the holidays,
Things can go wrong
yeah,
in funny and sometimes scary ways.
and by doing that, It challenges those perfect versions of Christmas.
Right.
That we see in movies and on TV.
Yeah, it's like instead of showing us the magic of Christmas, it's showing us how everything could fall apart.
Right.
And it does it in this way that mixes horror comedy and satire.
Yeah.
That makes you think while you're entertained. We've talked a lot about how Gremlins subverts expectations and about its cultural impact.
Right.
But beyond all the chaos and laughs, what do you think Gremlins is really trying to say? Is there like a deeper message?
That's a question that's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
Viewers and critics have been wondering about that for decades.
Yeah.
And I think there are many ways to interpret it.
Okay.
But one way to look at it is as a warning about being responsible.
Okay.
Billy doesn't follow the rules.
Right.
And that leads to terrible consequences, not just for him, but for the whole town.
It's like a PSA about reading the instruction manual.
Yeah.
But for a monster movie, it reminds us that even small actions can have big consequences that we didn't expect.
And sometimes dangerous consequences. We have to think about our choices.
Right.
And how they might affect us and the people around us.
No, okay, so it's about taking responsibility for what we do.
Yeah.
But we also talked about how the Gremlins themselves seem to represent something deeper, something about our culture and what we want.
Exactly, and I think that's another part of the message.
Okay.
The Gremlins are like the bad side of human nature, our greed, our impulsiveness, our ability to destroy things. They're like a twisted reflection of our worst tendencies.
Like the classic idea that the monster is our inner demons, but with a funny twist.
Exactly. And by putting these creatures in a Christmas setting, which is usually about joy and giving, Dante's pointing out the tension between our good side and our bad side.
Yeah.
It's like a reminder that even during the holidays, those bad impulses are still there.
Right. Hiding just below the surface.
So Gremlins isn't just about cute creatures gone bad. It's about how humans are both good and bad. Right. The struggle between those two sides. And it reminds us that those impulses can come out in unexpected and often destructive ways.
That's a really interesting way to look at it.
Thanks.
And it makes sense why people connect with it.
Yeah.
Because we all have those impulses. We all have times when we want to break the rules.
Yeah.
Do what we want.
Right.
And maybe even cause a little trouble.
And Gremlins is great because it explores those themes in a way that's both entertaining and makes you think.
Yeah, you can enjoy it on the surface, but there are also these deeper layers to unpack.
If you want to dig a little deeper.
And that's what makes it a classic.
Right.
It works on many levels.
Yeah.
And people are still talking about it and interpreting it decades later.
It's a movie that offers something for everyone.
It's funny, talking about all this makes me think about how Gremlins is almost like a fairy tale for adults.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but like a twisted one.
Okay, I see what you mean.
You have these like fantastical creatures and this magical setting and these rules that have to be followed.
Right.
But it all goes wrong.
Yeah, horribly wrong.
And like many fairy tales, Gremlins has this really strong visual element.
Oh, yeah.
That makes it so appealing.
It does.
The review talked about the practical effects.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Those effects were so good.
Yeah, they're great.
They still look amazing today, even compared to all the CGI we see in movies now.
Yeah, it's true.
Why do you think those practical effects still work so well?
Well, I think it's because they feel real.
Yeah.
Like you can touch them. They have this weight and presence. It shows how skilled the filmmakers were.
The review mentioned that Gremlins use this technique called animatronics.
Oh, yeah.
Can you explain what that is?
Sure.
And why it was so innovative back then?
It's basically like making life-size puppets.
Okay.
That are controlled electronically or mechanically.
So they move.
Yeah, it lets you create more subtle movements and expressions than you could with normal puppets.
Yeah.
It made things look more realistic, which was groundbreaking in the 1980s.
So instead of having these like stiff puppets,
they
could actually move and react in a more lifelike way.
Exactly. And that was super important for a movie like Gremlins.
Why?
Because the creatures are like main characters.
Right.
The audience had to believe in them.
Yeah.
Like they were really interacting with the human characters for the movie to work.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like those animatronics made it hard to tell what was real and what wasn't. And that made those creatures even more convincing. And let's be honest.
Yeah.
Way creepier.
It's true.
And I think that realness is part of why those effects still look good today.
Yeah, I agree.
They have this timeless quality that CGI often doesn't have.
It's like the difference between a hand-drawn animation
and
a computer-generated one.
There's something special about that handmade look.
It's true.
It's like you can feel the artistry, talk about all this technical stuff. Makes me appreciate how much work went into making this movie.
Me too.
It's not just the story.
Right.
It's all the artistry and skill that brought those characters and that world to life.
Absolutely. Gremlins really shows what practical filmmaking can do.
Yeah.
And it reminds us that sometimes the old ways are the best.
Speaking of those creatures.
Yeah.
Remember those rules Billy gets about Gizmo? No bright light, no water, no feeding after midnight.
Right.
They seem simple.
Yeah.
But they never really explain why.
That's true.
That always kind of bugged me.
Oh, yeah.
Like, are those rules just random? Or is there something more behind them?
I think that's up to each person watching to decide. But one way to think about those rules is that they show how we as humans tend to push the limits.
Oh, okay.
Gilly knows he shouldn't break the rules.
Right.
But he's just too curious.
And it's not like he wants to cause trouble.
No, he doesn't.
He really cares about Gizmo.
Yeah, he does.
And he wants to share him with others.
Right.
But he doesn't realize what will happen if he breaks the rules.
Exactly. And I think that's a really important theme in the movie.
What's that?
This tension between our good intentions and our ability to mess things up.
Right.
We often don't see the consequences of what we do until it's too late.
So it's a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
But with monsters and laughs.
Exactly.
And that mix of entertainment and deeper meaning is what makes Gremlins so great.
Yeah, it's a movie you can enjoy on different levels.
Right.
And it still makes people talk and think about it all these years later.
Well, I think we've covered just about everything there is to say about Gremlins.
I think so.
We talked about the basic stuff and the deeper themes, the characters, the director's style, how it changed the film industry.
Right.
And even the technical stuff about those incredible special effects.
It's been a really interesting look at a classic movie.
It really has.
Yeah.
So to all you listeners out there, if you want a movie that's funny, scary, and makes you think all at the same time, I highly recommend checking out Gremlins.
Yeah, it's a good one.
And pay attention to those rules.
Right.
Or I guess the consequences of breaking them.
That's the important part.
Who knows, you might even figure out what those rules really mean.
Yeah, it's up to you.
Until next time, happy watching.